The U.S. military is facing serious problems in the form of faulty wiring in vehicles, namely aircraft, but it exists in other vehicles like submarines, tanks, drones, anything with wires and electric components. This problem is ongoing and has been around for a long time. Before we look in more detail at why that's the case, we first need to understand what is meant by faulty wiring. It's certainly not as simple as a wire that isn't connected between 2 points, or a wire that touches something it's not supposed to, causing an arc or a short. There are passive components like resistors, diodes, capacitors, Zener diodes. There are active components like relays and switches that need alternate source to engage them. There are also components in the electric system that need manual interaction, like breakers, manual switches, pots, and push buttons. In addition, there are other components of the electric system that need to be considered, fiber optics and communication buses as examples. With all of these components, faulty wiring becomes so much more complicated when you add into the mix intermittent failures. If you take an F-18 on a flight and there's a problem with the electric system, when you bring the plane back down, it can be very difficult to find an intermittent problem. But all of these components and pieces are only the beginning of the problem of faulty wiring. The first time I went to a repair depot, I saw 2 guys with a multimeter testing a control panel of a V-22 that had just been rebuilt. When I asked how long it took to test, they told me it took the 2 of them 2 weeks to complete the test, and that is only a portion of what needs to be tested. I asked why they weren't using a piece of automated test equipment, and they took me to a cable shop where I saw a piece of automated test equipment. And on top of it was a board, and on top of the board was a wire harness that had just been built. And again, 2 guys were using a multimeter to test the wire harness. I asked why they weren't using the automated test equipment, and they said that nobody knows how to use it. And worse yet, nobody knows how to write a test program for it. Then they took me to a cabinet filled with all kinds of testers, meters, sources. We discussed the usage of these pieces of equipment, and they said some of these are antiquated and don't work any longer, or the technology is completely out of date. Another reason they aren't used is because nobody knows how to use them. But ultimately, it's because each of these tests only small portions of an electric system of a vehicle, and it takes too long and it's too difficult to find complex problems when you're trying to sort through all the different pieces of the electric system separately. This all points to a much larger problem. One of the biggest problems with faulty wiring is when there is no culture of testing. As in all culture, culture needs to be established, grown, and maintained. In order to develop a culture of testing, it must begin with the hardware. You would need a piece of test equipment that can do multiple things: test wires, passive components, active components, do intermittent testing, fiber optic testing, and test communication systems. But even if you had the correct hardware, a culture of testing can't be established and grown. It needs to have powerful software behind it, software that makes test program creation easier. It would need to have something with shared libraries, information that can be used across platforms, in different locations, something that doesn't have to be continually recreated. Culture would also be furthered if technology didn't go out of date, wouldn't become antiquated. That way, the use of the test software and hardware would stay consistent. Does such a test platform exist? With all this in mind, I submit for your consideration the WeTech 4 Series test platform. Culture-driven, cutting-edge technology with a modular design to guarantee growth into the future. Not only does this hardware test wires, passive components, active components, manual components in combination with each other, but it also allows for intermittence testing. Add fiber optics and communication systems, and the hardware of this test platform is unparalleled in the industry. Like the hardware, CETUS software is designed with modularity in mind. It allows the test operator to choose one electric system, multiple electric systems, or the entirety of the electric system of the vehicle to be tested at one time. With step-by-step user interaction commands, pictures, video clips, audio clips, no prior knowledge of the test system is required in order to operate the tester and run a test. With shared libraries of components, adapter cables, modules, and test programs, Information is easily shared between locations and even platforms to ensure that knowledge is shared and not lost. With nearly 50 years of experience, not only does WEETECH's hardware and software help to establish and grow culture, but our staff of engineers, software programmers, and service personnel help to maintain culture, servicing 24/7 around the globe. Let the WeTech 4 Series test platform help establish, maintain, and grow testing culture for your organization.